Her father called her too big to marry and sent her to work for a black cowboy, believing it was the ultimate humiliation for his 310-pound daughter. But what happened when Thomas Mitchell treated her like a queen would change everything she believed about love, worth, and beauty. This is the incredible true story of Margaret O'Brien, whose forbidden romance in 1887 Wyoming territory proves that real love sees the heart, not the size or color. If this story touches your heart, please hit that like button, subscribe for more incredible real-life stories, and ring that notification bell so you never miss our uploads. Trust me, you won't believe how this black cowboy changed everything for the woman society rejected. The Wyoming morning carried the bite of early autumn, but Margaret O'Brien felt nothing but the cold weight of shame as she sat in the back of the wagon. Her father's words from the night before echoed in her mind like a death sentence. "No decent white man will have you, Maggie. You're too big to marry, too expensive to keep. But I found someone who needs help and doesn't mind your condition." At 22 years old and 310 pounds on a 5-foot frame, Maggie had become what her father, Sean O'Brien, considered his greatest failure. He'd watched her younger sister, Sarah, marry the banker's son just months before, all petite elegance and social grace. Meanwhile, Maggie had stood in the shadows of the wedding, feeling like a mountain among the guests, their whispers following her like smoke. "Thomas Mitchell runs cattle about 3 days north of here," Sean called back from the driver's seat, his Irish accent thick with distaste. He's a Negro, but he's got money and needs household help. Said he'd take you on for room and board." Maggie's stomach clenched. Her father was sending her to work for a black man not because he respected the man's character or success, but because he believed no white man would want her. It was the ultimate humiliation in her father's eyes, and hers too, if she was honest. "People talk, Papa," she said quietly. "People already talk," Sean replied harshly. "At least this way you'll be useful instead of just taking up space." The wagon hit a deep rut, and Maggie gripped the sides to steady herself, her substantial frame shifting with the motion. Her reinforced trunk slid across the wagon bed, containing the few dresses that had been specially made to fit her large frame. She had helped her mother with the household accounts, knew every family in their town of Cedar Falls, and had read every book in the schoolhouse library twice. But none of that mattered now. The landscape rolling past was magnificent, golden grass stretching the purple mountains, cottonwoods lining the creek beds with their leaves just beginning to turn. But beauty felt like a luxury she had no right to appreciate when she was being shipped off like unwanted cargo. Mrs. Henderson said her nephew might be interested in a wife, Maggie had pleaded just weeks ago, desperate for any alternative. "And saddle that poor boy with feeding you?" her father had snapped. "You eat enough for 3 people, Maggie. No man's income could support that, and no man should have to try." The memory stung fresh as they approached what must be the Mitchell Ranch. Maggie's expectations had been shaped by her father's obvious belief that he was sending her to some ramshackle operation run by a man who couldn't do better than hire his oversized daughter. Instead, she found herself staring at one of the finest ranches she'd ever seen. The house was large and well-built, constructed of sturdy logs with a wraparound porch that spoke of both comfort and prosperity. The barn was enormous, clearly designed for a substantial operation, and the corrals were well-maintained and populated with some of the finest horses she'd ever seen. "Well, I'll be damned," her father muttered, his prejudices clearly challenged by the evidence of success before him. A man emerged from the house, and Maggie's breath caught. Thomas Mitchell was tall and powerfully built, with broad shoulders and the kind of presence that commanded respect. His dark skin spoke of years working under the sun, but his clothes were well-made and clean. Most surprising of all was his face, handsome in a way that made her heart skip, with intelligent eyes and a bearing that spoke of confidence and success. "Mr. O'Brien," Tom said, his voice deep and cultured, extending his hand. "I'm Thomas Mitchell. Thank you for making the journey." Sean hesitated before shaking the offered hand, clearly uncomfortable with the respectful treatment. "This is my daughter, Margaret. She's a hard worker." Tom's eyes found Maggie's, and she braced herself for the usual reaction, shock, disgust, or pitying tolerance. Instead, she saw something that made her heart race, simple acknowledgement as if he was meeting any new person without judgment or surprise. "Miss O'Brien," he said, touching the brim of his hat. "Welcome to the Double T Ranch. I hope you'll find it to your liking." "Thank you, Mr. Mitchell," she managed, her voice barely above a whisper. As her father unloaded her trunk, Tom stepped forward. "Allow me," he said, lifting the heavy trunk as if it weighed nothing. "I'll show you to your room, and then we can discuss the arrangements." The interior of the house was as impressive as the exterior. The main room was spacious and well-furnished, with a stone fireplace and windows that let in plenty of light. Everything was clean and well-maintained, speaking of pride and prosperity. "I built this place 5 years ago," Tom said, noticing her surprise. "Started with nothing but a handful of cattle and a lot of determination. Now I run about 1,000 head and employ 6 good men." "It's beautiful," Maggie said and meant it. "Your room is upstairs," Tom continued, leading the way. "I thought you might prefer privacy. The kitchen is well equipped, and I've stocked it with everything you should need. I'm not expecting miracles, just good, honest cooking, and help keeping the place tidy." The room he showed her was larger than her room at home, with a sturdy bed, a wardrobe, and a window that looked out over the rolling prairie. The bed was clearly built for durability rather than delicacy, and Maggie felt a moment of relief that she wouldn't have to worry about breaking furniture. "Mr. Mitchell," she said, turning to face him, "I should tell you, my father sent me here because he believes no one else would have me. I'm not like other women." Tom's expression grew serious. "Miss O'Brien, I asked your father to send you here because I need help with my household, not because I'm doing him a favor. You're here because I believe you can do the work. Your size doesn't concern me. Your character does." The simple dignity of his words made her eyes fill with tears. "Thank you," she whispered. "Dinner's at 6, Tom said gently. "Nothing fancy, just good food and honest conversation. I think you'll find life here different from what you're used to." After he left, Maggie sat on the bed and looked around the room that would be her new home. For the first time in her life, she wasn't being hidden away or apologized for. She was here to work, to contribute, to be useful, and the man who'd hired her had looked at her not with pity or disgust, but with the kind of respect she'd never dared hope for. Outside, she could hear her father's wagon pulling away, taking with it the last connection to her old life. But for the first time in years, Maggie O'Brien felt something she'd almost forgotten: hope. Dawn on the Double T Ranch came with the sound of horses nickering in the corral and the distant lowing of cattle. Maggie woke to sunlight streaming through her window and the realization that she'd slept better than she had in months. The bed was solid and comfortable, and the room felt like a sanctuary rather than a hiding place. She dressed quickly in her plainest work dress and made her way downstairs, expecting to find Tom already gone about his ranch work. Instead, she found him in the kitchen, coffee already made and bacon sizzling in a large cast-iron skillet. "Good morning, Miss O'Brien," he said, looking up with a smile. "I hope you slept well." "Very well, thank you," she replied, feeling awkward. "I should be doing this. You hired me to cook." "I hired you to help," Tom corrected gently. "That doesn't mean you have to do everything. Besides, I've been cooking for myself for years. I thought we might start with breakfast together, and you can see how I like things done." As they worked side by side, Maggie found herself relaxing in a way she hadn't expected. Tom moved around the kitchen with easy competence, his large hands surprisingly gentle as he handled the cookware. He asked her about her preferences, her experience, her ideas for meals, treating her input as valuable rather than irrelevant. "I usually have the crew eat at the bunkhouse," he explained as they prepared plates. "But I take my meals here in the main house. I'd be pleased to have your company if you're comfortable with that." The idea of eating with her employer was foreign to Maggie. In her father's house, she'd often been made to feel like her appetite was shameful, something to be hidden or apologized for. But Tom was setting a full plate in front of her without comment, as if sharing a meal was the most natural thing in the world. "Tell me about yourself, Miss O'Brien," Tom said as they ate. "What did you do before coming here?" "I helped my mother with the household," Maggie replied carefully. "I kept the accounts, did the marketing, managed the pantry. I read a lot." "What kind of books?" "Everything I could get my hands on. History, literature, even some agricultural journals from the library." She paused, then added, "My father thought it was a waste of time. Said book learning wouldn't help me find a husband." Tom's expression darkened slightly. "Your father was wrong about a lot of things, it seems." The simple statement, delivered without judgment but with conviction, made Maggie's heart race. No one had ever defended her against her father's harsh assessments. "What about you, Mr. Mitchell?" she asked, changing the subject. "How did you come to own all this?" Tom was quiet for a moment, his coffee cup cradled in his large hands. "I was born into slavery in Georgia," he said finally. "Escaped when I was 16, made my way north, then west. Worked cattle drives for years, saved every penny I could. When I had enough, I bought my first 100 acres and 10 head of cattle. That was 8 years ago." "You built all this in 8 years?" Maggie asked, genuinely impressed. "Hard work and smart decisions," Tom replied, "and a lot of luck. The cattle market's been good, and I've been careful with my money. But mostly, I've tried to treat people fairly and earn respect through my actions." The sound of approaching horses interrupted their conversation. Through the window, Maggie could see 6 riders approaching the house, clearly the ranch hands Tom had mentioned. "That's the crew," Tom said, standing. "They're good men, every one of them. Some people might be surprised to see white men working for a black rancher, but out here competence matters more than color. Most of the time, anyway." The men who filed into the kitchen were a diverse group, young and old, white and Mexican, united by the weathered look of those who work with cattle for a living. They were polite to Maggie, touching their hats respectfully, but she could see the curiosity in their eyes. "Boys, this is Miss O'Brien," Tom said. "She'll be helping with the household from now on." "Ma'am," the oldest of the group said, a graying man with kind eyes. "I'm John Walsh, the foreman. Anything you need, you just let me know." "Thank you," Maggie replied, touched by the genuine welcome. As the men discussed the day's work, Maggie found herself listening intently. Tom's leadership style was consultative rather than authoritative. He asked for input, listened to suggestions, and made decisions based on collective wisdom. It was clear that his men respected him not just as their employer, but as someone whose judgment they trusted. "Miss O'Brien," Tom said as the men prepared to leave, "I need to ride out to check the north pasture today. Would you be comfortable managing things here on your own?" "Of course," she replied, though the thought of being alone on the ranch made her nervous. "If you need anything, Maria Gonzalez comes by twice a week to help with the washing. She's due today, and she speaks English well. She can show you where everything is." After the men left, Maggie set about exploring her new domain. The kitchen was spacious and well-equipped, with a pantry that was better stocked than her father's had ever been. The rest of the house was equally impressive, clean, comfortable, and furnished with an eye for both practicality and beauty. Maria Gonzalez proved to be a godsend. She was a small, energetic woman in her 40s who had been helping Tom with the household for 2 years. Her English was indeed excellent, and she had strong opinions about how things should be done. "Senor Tom, he is good man," Maria said as they worked together on the washing. "He pay fair wages. He treat everyone with respect. Some people, they don't like successful black men, but he don't let that stop him." "Has he had trouble?" Maggie asked carefully. "Some. There are always people who think they know better than God about who should prosper. But Senor Tom, he is smart. He makes allies, he helps his neighbors when they need it, and he never gives anyone reason to question his character." As they talked, Maggie found herself hungry for information about her new employer. Maria painted a picture of a man who was not only successful but generous, helping struggling neighbors, supporting the local church, contributing to community projects. "He deserves good woman," Maria said, giving Maggie a meaningful look. "Someone who sees his worth, not just his color." "See, maybe he will," Maria said with a smile that suggested she thought she already had. When Tom returned that evening, he found the house spotless, dinner prepared, and Maggie waiting with a detailed report of the day's activities. She'd organized the pantry, planned menus for the week, and even started a small garden plot behind the house. "You've been busy," he said, looking around the kitchen with approval. "I wanted to earn my keep," Maggie replied. "Miss O'Brien," Tom said, his voice serious, "I want you to understand something. You're not here as a charity case or because I'm doing your father a favor. You're here because I believe you can contribute something valuable to this branch. I hope you'll come to see yourself that way, too." That night, as Maggie sat by her window looking out over the moonlit prairie, she realized that for the first time in her life, someone was treating her like she mattered. Not as a burden to be endured or a problem to be solved, but as a person with value and dignity. And the man who was showing her this respect was someone she was beginning to admire more with each passing hour. 3 weeks into her time at the Double T Ranch, Maggie had settled into a routine that felt both natural and revelatory. She rose early to prepare breakfast, spent her days managing the household with increasing confidence, and found herself looking forward to the evening hours when Tom would return from his work and they would share dinner and conversation. It was during these quiet evening meals that she began to understand the man who had given her this second chance. Tom was educated, self-taught, but widely read and thoughtful about the world around him. He asked her opinions on everything from politics to literature, listened to her thoughts with genuine interest, and treated her ideas with a respect she'd never experienced. "You mentioned you read agricultural journals," he said one evening as they cleared the dinner dishes. "What do you think about the new breeding techniques they're discussing for cattle?" Maggie paused, surprised by the question. "I think they make sense in theory, but I wonder about the practical challenges. Keeping detailed records, managing bloodlines, it would require more organization than most ranchers are used to." "Exactly what I was thinking," Tom replied, his face lighting up. "I've been considering implementing some of these ideas, but I wanted to discuss them with someone who understands both the theory and the practical side." The fact that he valued her input on ranch business made her heart race. No one had ever asked her opinion on anything important before. Their relationship began to deepen through shared work and conversation. Tom started asking her to help with the ranch's bookkeeping, and she discovered he was an astute businessman who had built his success through careful planning and smart investments. She began contributing ideas for improving efficiency, and he listened to every suggestion with serious consideration. "You have a good head for business," he told her one afternoon as they reviewed the quarterly accounts. "Ever think about being a partner in an operation like this?" "Women don't typically," Maggie began, then stopped herself. She was learning that Tom didn't think in terms of typical limitations. "Women don't typically what?" he asked gently. "Own businesses, make decisions about cattle and land." She paused and added quietly, "Women like me especially don't." Tom set down his pen and looked at her directly. "Margaret, I need you to understand something. The only limitations on what you can do are the ones you accept. Size, gender, other people's opinions, they only have power if you give it to them." It was a radical idea for a woman who had been told her entire life that she was too much of everything, too big, too costly, too unsuitable for polite society. But in Tom's presence, she was beginning to believe it might be true. The shift in their relationship became apparent during a crisis in early November. A late blizzard had stranded several head of cattle in a remote canyon, and the entire crew was out trying to bring them to safety. Tom had been gone for 2 days when John Walsh returned to the ranch alone, his face grim with worry. "Miss O'Brien, I need to ask a favor," he said, hat in hand. "Boss got thrown from his horse yesterday. He's hurt. Not bad, but bad enough. We need supplies and someone who can tend to him properly." "What kind of supplies?" Maggie asked, already moving toward the kitchen. "Medical supplies, food, blankets, and—" John hesitated. "We need someone who knows about nursing. Maria's gone to visit her sister, and none of us know much about caring for injuries." "I'll come," Maggie said without hesitation. John looked uncertain. "It's rough country, ma'am, and the weather's not good." "I can ride," Maggie said firmly. "And I helped care for my mother when she was ill. I know something about nursing." The ride to the canyon was indeed difficult. The snow was deep, the wind bitter, and the terrain treacherous. But Maggie's determination to reach Tom drove her forward, and she found herself drawing on reserves of strength she hadn't known she possessed. She found Tom in a makeshift shelter, conscious but clearly in pain. His left leg was injured, and he had a gash on his forehead that needed attention. But what struck her most was the relief in his eyes when he saw her. "Margaret," he said, trying to sit up, "you shouldn't have come out in this weather." "Hush," she said, kneeling beside him. "Let me look at your injuries." For the next 2 days, Maggie took charge of the situation, with a competence that surprised everyone, including herself. She cleaned and dressed Tom's wounds, prepared hot meals for the crew, and organized the rescue of the remaining cattle. Her size, which had always been a source of shame, became an asset. She was strong enough to help move injured animals, steady enough to work in difficult conditions, and substantial enough to provide warmth when Tom's fever spiked during the second night. "You're remarkable," Tom said during one of his lucid moments, as she bathed his forehead with cool water. "I don't know what I would have done without you." "You don't need to say that," Maggie replied, embarrassed by the praise. "I'm not saying it to be kind. Tom said, his hand finding hers. I'm saying it because it's true. You're the strongest, most capable woman I've ever known, and the most beautiful. The word hung between them like a promise in the flickering light of the campfire, with the storm raging outside their shelter. Maggie felt something shift between them. This wasn't gratitude or convenience, it was something deeper, more profound. Tom, she whispered, not sure what she wanted to say. I know this is complicated, he said softly. I know people will have opinions about us, a black man and a white woman, especially a woman who doesn't fit their narrow ideas of what's acceptable. But I don't care about any of that. I care about you. I care about you too, Maggie admitted, her heart racing. More than I should, probably. Why more than you should? Because I'm not. I'm not the kind of woman men fall in love with. Tom's eyes flashed with something like anger. Says who? Your father. The people in your town. They don't know you, Margaret. They don't see what I see. What do you see? She asked, barely breathing. I see a woman who risked her own safety to help me, who ran my household better than I ever could, who has ideas I could help this ranch grow and prosper, who makes me laugh and challenges me to think. He paused, his voice dropped into a whisper. I see the woman I want to spend the rest of my life with. When he kissed her, it was soft and reverent, as if he was handling something infinitely precious, and for the first time in her life, Maggie felt beautiful. Not because she had changed, but because she was seeing herself through the eyes of someone who truly saw her. What happens now? She asked when they broke apart. Now, Tom said, his voice rough with emotion, we decide if we're brave enough to build something together, despite what the world might say. I'm brave enough if you are, Maggie replied, and meant it. Outside, the storm was beginning to break, and the first stars were appearing in the clearing sky. Inside their shelter, two people who had found each other against all odds held each other close, planning a future that would be built on love rather than society's narrow expectations. The journey back to the Double T Ranch was slow due to Tom's injury, but it gave Maggie and Tom time to talk about their future. The conversation was both thrilling and terrifying. They were planning to build a life together in a world that would judge them harshly for their love. People are going to talk, Maggie said as they rode side by side, Tom's legs strapped and splinted but healing well. Let them talk, Tom replied. I've been dealing with people's opinions my whole life. The difference is, now I have someone worth fighting for. Your ranch, your business, what if people stop dealing with you because of me? Tom was quiet for a moment, then said, Margaret, I built this ranch from nothing because I believed I deserved to succeed. I'm not going to let fear of other people's prejudices keep me from the woman I love. We'll face whatever comes together. When they reached the ranch, John Walsh and the other hands were waiting with obvious relief. Word had spread that the boss was injured, and they'd been worried about both his physical condition and what it might mean for their jobs. Boss, John said, helping Tom down from his horse. Good to see you up and about. Thanks to Miss O'Brien, Tom replied, his arm around Maggie's waist in a gesture of both support and affection. She saved my life out there. The men exchanged glances, clearly noting the intimacy between Tom and Maggie, but their respect for both their employer and the woman who had risked herself to help him was evident. Over the following weeks, as Tom recovered and resumed his duties, their relationship deepened. They worked together on ranch business, with Maggie proving to have an excellent head for organization and planning. She suggested improvements to the bookkeeping system, helped design a more efficient layout for the winter feeding stations, and even contributed ideas for marketing their cattle to eastern buyers. You're not just helping me, Tom said one evening as they reviewed the quarterly reports. You're making this ranch better. You're making me better. You were already successful, Maggie replied, but she felt a warm glow of pride at his words. I was surviving, Tom corrected. With you, I'm thriving. Their first real test came in December, when a group of neighboring ranchers arrived for what they called a friendly visit. Maggie recognized it immediately as an interrogation. Tom, the leader, a man named Harrison, said without preamble, we need to talk about your situation. What situation is that? Tom asked, his voice calm but with steel underneath. Your housekeeper, Harrison said, nodding toward Maggie. People are talking. saying things that aren't good for any of us. What people are saying is none of my concern, Tom replied. Miss O'Brien is a valuable member of my household staff. Is that all she is? Harrison pressed. Because if she's more than that, if you're involved with her, it's going to cause problems for all of us ranchers. People don't like mixing of the races, and they especially don't like seeing a woman like her with a successful black man. Maggie felt her cheeks burn with shame and anger. Even here, in this place where she'd found acceptance and love, she was being reduced to her size and judged as unsuitable. Tom stood up, his full height imposing in the ranch house's main room. Gentlemen, I'm going to say this once. Miss O'Brien is my fiancée. We're going to be married in the spring. If that causes you problems, that's your issue to resolve. But I won't have her disrespected in my house. The silence that followed was deafening. Harrison's face was red with indignation, and the other ranchers looked uncomfortable. You're making a mistake, Tom, Harrison said finally. This isn't going to end well for any of us. The only mistake I've made, Tom replied, is waiting this long to ask her to marry me properly. After the men left, Maggie stood in the kitchen, shaking with a mixture of fear and pride. Tom had defended her, claimed her publicly despite the potential cost to his business and reputation. You didn't have to do that, she said when he came to find her. Yes, I did, Tom replied, taking her hands in his. I did it because I love you, and because you deserve to be defended, but also because I meant what I said. I want to marry you, Margaret. I want to build a life with you, have children with you, grow old with you. Will you have me? Through her tears, Maggie nodded. Yes, she whispered. Yes, I'll have you. The engagement was announced in the local paper, causing a sensation that reached all the way back to Cedar Falls. When Sean O'Brien received the news, he sat in his kitchen for a long time, staring at the announcement. A Negro cowboy, his wife whispered. What will people think? They'll think what they always think, Sean replied heavily, that she's a disgrace. But that night, alone in his study, Sean found himself thinking about the man who had proposed to his daughter, Thomas Mitchell, owner of one of the most successful ranches in the territory, respected by his peers, prosperous enough to support a family, and more than that, a man who had looked at Maggie and seen not a burden or a problem, but a woman worthy of love. For the first time in years, Sean O'Brien wondered if he had been wrong about his daughter. Not about her size, but about what that size meant in the grand scheme of things. They were married on a beautiful April morning in 1888, with the ceremony held at the Double T Ranch. The local preacher, initially reluctant, was convinced by Tom's generous donation to the church building fund. The guest list was small but meaningful. The ranch hands, Maria Gonzalez and her family, a few neighboring ranchers who had chosen loyalty over prejudice, and surprisingly, Margaret's mother, who had come without her husband's knowledge. I couldn't miss my daughter's wedding, she told Maggie, tears in her eyes. I should have stood up for you years ago. Maggie wore a dress that Maria had sewn for her. Not white, but a beautiful deep blue that brought out her eyes and fit her perfectly. Tom stood beside her in his best suit, tall and handsome and proud, his love for her evident in every line of his face. Do you, Thomas Mitchell, take Margaret O'Brien to be your lawfully wedded wife? I do, Tom said, his voice strong and sure. Do you, Margaret O'Brien, take Thomas Mitchell to be your lawfully wedded husband? I do, Maggie replied, her voice clear and confident. When they kissed, it was to the sound of genuine applause from people who had come to witness love triumphing over prejudice. The years that followed were not without challenges. Some neighbors continued to shun them, and they faced occasional harassment from those who couldn't accept their union. But they also found unexpected allies, and their ranch continued to prosper under their joint management. Maggie proved to be not just a capable ranch manager, but a shrewd businesswoman. She negotiated better contracts with cattle buyers, implemented new breeding programs, and even started a small side business selling preserved foods to the growing town nearby. You know what I love most about you? Tom said one evening as they sat on their porch, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of gold and crimson. What's that? Maggie asked, leaning against his strong shoulder. You've never let anyone make you smaller than you are. Not your father, not the neighbors, not anyone. You're exactly who you're meant to be, and you make me want to be the best version of myself. 3 years after their marriage, Maggie gave birth to their first child, a daughter they named Hope. As she held her baby girl, Maggie marveled at how different this child's life would be from her own. Hope would grow up knowing she was loved and valued, that her worth wasn't measured by her size or her conformity to society's expectations. "She's perfect," Tom said, cradling both his wife and daughter in his arms. "She's ours," Maggie replied, and in that simple statement was everything: love, acceptance, and the promise of a future built on the foundation of two people who had found each other against all odds. On the vast Wyoming prairie, where the sky stretched endlessly and love was measured by the strength of one's heart rather than the approval of society, the Mitchell family had found their home. And in their love story, they had proved that true love really could conquer all, one day, one challenge, one small victory at a time.